They sound like they're either shot up or boozed up. I don't know what, but I want to hang out with them. They sound fun.
All right, to people that call. But I'll say this. I got a couple of nice compliments. You know, yeah. I got, you suck, shut up. I mean, and I'm not killing kittens every time I open my mouth.
Come paint my house, because I understand you are a house painter. Did you collect garbage too?
Comment on Laura tomorrow. We'll play it for you.
Get off my time. This is my time.
Have a good show.
Just kidding. Sean, thanks a lot. And welcome to the Ingraham Angle from Washington. We have a jam-packed show tonight. What other type of show are we going to have? Conservative commentator Ben Shapiro. He just delivered a controversial speech. That means it's any speech. At the University of Connecticut campus and stores. The speech sent campus leftists into frothy fits of frenzy. He joins us exclusively to tell us what happened. And an intensifying showdown tonight between the Justice Department and the House Intel Committee over the release of that classified FISA memo. And Intel Committee member Peter King is here to react. Plus, as the president says, he's ready to talk with Bob Mueller under oath. Longtime Trump confidant Roger Stone says speaking with Mueller would be a trap for the president. He joins us to explain why. But first, accountability in the special counsel's office and a press that just doesn't care. That's the focus of tonight's angle. As soon as Robert Mueller was appointed special counsel in the Russia investigation, politicians rushed to cover him with a blanket of invincibility.
Senator, tell us, have you seen anything in this investigation so far that would suggest that Robert Mueller has a conflict?
No, I haven't. I sit on the Judiciary Committee along with Chris or Senator Coons, and I have not seen any evidence to suggest that.
I do not at all believe that Mr. Mueller has been compromised or his investigation. I think he's beyond reproach.
I have a lot of admiration and respect for Director Mueller.
You've got somebody who, by all accounts, is an independent person, somebody who's got lots of integrity.
He enjoys very broad support in the Senate, both among Republicans and Democrats, because of his long service as the FBI director, because of his record of respectable leadership as a senior federal prosecutor.
Well, in other words, President Trump, don't you dare even think about coming close, even sort of maybe kind of firing Mueller. Well, a few months later, Congress rushed in to propose legislation to insulate the special counsel from executive branch interference or termination. Republican pro-amnesty Senator Tom Tillis, along with liberal Delaware Senator Chris Coons, introduced a bill that would allow Mueller to challenge any removal in court. Now, Senator Lindsey Graham and Cory Booker, Wonder Twin Powers activate, they went even further. They sponsored a bill that would prevent the firing of Mueller. Apparently, he's so perfect, he can never be fired. Well, Senators Ted Cruz and Mike Lee were properly skeptical about the constitutionality of any such moves such as that. Remember, Mueller works for the executive branch after all. So I have a question. Why can't all federal employees challenge their firing? Well, of course, this would be absurd. Now, setting aside whether it would be politically smart for President Trump to fire Mueller, and it wouldn't be smart, he is the head of the executive branch, and Congress has no business interfering with either the firing or the hiring decisions of the executive branch. All they have is the confirmation process for Senate confirmation. Otherwise, stay out of the business. So my question is, why were these senators so eager to build up Mueller and his team? And they were so eager to insulate them from executive branch oversight and ultimately perhaps termination. Well, thank God we have diligent congressmen who do take their oversight responsibility seriously. I'm talking about Congressman Devin Nunes, Matt Gaetz, Trey Gowdy, Robert Goodlatte, and Peter King, who will join us in just a few moments. You don't want to miss this segment. Their determination to see that this investigation doesn't turn into some kind of star chamber, I mean, it's already turned up incredible things so far. Missing or discussed thumb drives, talk of deleting text messages, talk of creating insurance policies against Trump, maybe even secret societies in the FBI, meetings convened outside of the FBI, and of course, all those missing texts that they may or may not be reconstructing. And by the way, speaking of these texts between Peter Strzok and his gal pal Lisa Page, we heard this today from the DOJ spokeswoman.
There were just over 50,000 text messages between Lisa Page and Peter Strzok during the time period that the Inspector General is investigating. And what we also know is that for about a 5-month period, those text messages never got into the FBI server. Obviously, we are reviewing immediately how they didn't get into the server in the first place.
First of all, who has anything that much to say to anyone that would account for 50,000 texts? I mean, they must have really had a hop-in relationship. There are reports, by the way, that glitch that she referenced may have affected 35,000 FBI employees and all their cell phones, different from what we heard a few days ago. But whatever the case, it prompts more questions now just about the basic competency of the FBI. Oh, sorry. Or are we not even allowed to wonder what else Peter Strzok and Lisa Page said to each other about Trump, Flynn, Comey, and maybe even the old Hillary email investigation? I'm sure it wasn't all 50,000 texts of sweet nothings. Well, by the way, I've noticed a pattern here. Maybe you have as well. The more we learn and the closer Congress gets to the truth, some of this underlying evidence, the more vicious the media attacks on those people who are seeking answers.
Meetings offsite, secret society, anything you can tell me without having to kill me?
This is nonsense. It's just complete nonsense. You're telling me that law enforcement agency is treating people unequally because they have a political vendetta? If you're going to tell the American people that's what happens in third world dictatorships. That doesn't happen here.
Republicans are talking about this secret society inside the FBI. They sound like crackpots.
They're going to rue the day of going down this road and having this institution come apart and sullied and have the kind of morale problems that could be long lasting down the road. And then who are they going to look to?
Well, certainly not to the head of the RNC, who's trashing the current president of the United States. Well, I'm just glad the Democrats are finally supporting law enforcement, the FBI. You can never question them. Let's look back now. For years, the left has indulged groups like Black Lives Matter, the ACLU, and CARE, who reflexively impugn the integrity and character of police anytime somebody captures one of those unpleasant cell phone videos. The police are too aggressive, they're racist, they're anti-Muslim, you know the drill. But now that Mueller, of course, it's state versus federal, but Mueller is targeting Trump, oh boy, law enforcement, you can't question them. They can't do any wrong. They should never be fired. Hell, they shouldn't even be questioned. Now, one would think that the media, some in the media, would have a little bit of curiosity about, I don't know, the conflicts of interest in the special counsel's office. If they distrust law enforcement and investigators on the state level so often, why do the feds get a pass? Well, there is, without a doubt, a deep-seated animus, and that's putting it mildly, toward the president by key members of the Mueller investigative team. And rather than confront the growing evidence, the left, well, they pull a Saul Alinsky and they start demonizing members of Congress and anyone, frankly, anyone who dares to question the methods and the motives of the Obama Justice Department and now the Mueller gang. The black cloud that hangs over this Russian investigation, let me tell you this. It wasn't created by Fox News. It certainly wasn't created by talk radio. I mean, none of us hired Jeannie Rhee, who previously worked for the Clinton Foundation and represented Obama's national security advisor, Ben Rhodes. And I'll tell you this, Fox News and talk radio did not appoint Andrew Weissman as lead prosecutor. A Democratic donor, remember, who we praised Sally Yates in that letter when she was fired by the president? And I don't think Fox News and talk radio appointed Peter Strzok either. I'll tell you this. No amount of scapegoating is going to make this any better. Now, Robert Mueller could be the greatest guy, the smartest guy ever, but if the man cannot oversee his own team and remove the partisans, then you have to conclude he's either in over his head or he's just not good for this role or he's negligent in this duty. And that will compromise the ultimate findings of this investigation, whatever they may be. Now, I also want to say this. Trump's team made some mistakes early on. I do not think, and I've said this before, it was smart to fire Jim Comey when they did. And it wasn't wise to talk to Lester Holt about the decision to fire Jim Comey. And if the story is true, well, I probably would not have asked acting FBI Director McCabe how he voted in the election. I wouldn't have done that either. The president has to be extra mindful, given the fact that he had already ticked off the intel community with his promise of reforms and, of course, some of his criticisms. So you kick that deep state hornet's nest and you're liable to get stung really bad. Well, today, the president told reporters, hey, I'm happy to talk to Mueller.
Are you going to talk to Mueller? I'm looking forward to it, actually.
You want to? You have a date set?
Here's the start, just so you understand. There's been no collusion whatsoever. There's no obstruction whatsoever. And I'm looking forward to it. I would love to do that, and I'd like to do it as soon as possible.
It's a voluntary interview.
Listen,
you would.
But I would do it.
Well, I was listening to that audio. He sure seems like he has nothing to hide. And the president appears ready and willing to be held up to scrutiny by the Mueller team. He wants to clear his name. But what about the men and women who are doing the scrutinizing? Who's going to hold them accountable? No one should be above the law. Not the president, not Hillary Clinton, and not the special counsel's team. And that's the angle. Joining us now for reaction from New York is Monica Crowley, who's a senior fellow at the London Center for Policy Research. And with me here in Washington is attorney Alan Orr. All right, guys, you heard my take here. Everybody needs to be accountable. Alan, take a shot.
Well, I think everybody is accountable. I think your concerns are about the individuals who are participating in the actual investigation, which doesn't mean the investigation itself has a problem. And there has not been an outcome yet. So why the big concern? If you're not guilty of a crime, then why is there a problem with going through the process?
Well, my concern is that when you populate your investigative team with individuals who have been either loyalists to the previous administration or who actively were engaged in the Hillary email investigation and actually helped edit Comey's announcement of the non-indictment indictment, that entanglement is the mere appearance of a conflict of interest is not what you want in an investigation like this. An appearance of a conflict in a case this serious is enough to shake the credibility of the investigation. And I'm not saying that everyone on the team is bad or they don't have I'm not saying that. But if the shoe were on the other foot and Hillary Clinton were being investigated by Hillary and were texting their boyfriend about Hillary, you'd be on this show going crazy about them. And I would actually say, you know something? You have a point there.
Well, maybe Hillary Clinton was the scapegoat for some Trump supporters. But right now, this is just a bunch of stories about individuals. There's not a lot of paperwork to back it up. And this is what the Justice Department does. So the fact that they also handle the Clinton emails doesn't mean that they can't also handle this. This is what their duty is as attorneys, to sort of deal with the facts before them. So the facts that they worked on prior cases or prior administrations have nothing to do with the instant case. They're looking for the facts, and that's what we're going after.
So you think it's okay for partisans to be working on an investigation when they were loyalists to the previous administration and worked on the exoneration of Hillary Clinton? You don't have any, in the shoe on the other foot, you wouldn't have any problem?
I would have it because they're professionals who
what does that mean, they're professionals?
Officers of the court. No, they're officers
perfect.
of the court.
There's only one perfect who ever walked the face of the earth. One perfect, Jesus Christ. Okay? None of us are perfect. None of us are flawless. And a conflict of interest, an apparent conflict or an appearance of a conflict on a case like this is not what you want to do. Bob Miller's the smartest person around. Like, he's the smartest guy who ever lived, apparently. But he had no problem bringing in these people who hate Donald Trump. They despise the man. I don't know how you can be independent in your thought and process if you hate him as much as they did. Monica, got to get you in on this. Well, look, Alan says they're professionals, they're doing their job, and I'm sure there are professionals in the investigation. And the Democrats say this is much ado about nothing. This is an investigation that needs to reach its conclusion, and everybody's throwing a bunch of, pixie dust up in the air, hoping it goes away.
Well, it may in fact be true, Laura, that this entire investigation was predicated on a lie about Russian collusion, which was essentially a frame of Donald Trump. These people never expected him to win. They expected Hillary Clinton to win. And so all of their possibly criminal and unethical shenanigans throughout the campaign to torpedo Donald Trump, and then once he was elected during the period of the transition to try to set him up on a Russian collusion narrative, they thought that all of that evidence would go away. And guess what? Donald Trump is now the president. That evidence is being uncovered left and right. And that's why the Democrats and the Mueller team, those who have in fact been corrupted, according to the evidence as we know it so far, that's why they are so frantically trying to deflect and lie about not just what they did, but about the president as well.
I want you guys to both listen to something that Adam Schiff, also, of course, on the Intel Committee, what he said about this concern about the investigators. Let's watch.
Why would you vote to not have access to read things?
The point was they didn't care what was in the underlying documents. They wanted to make a political statement. They wanted to feed the beast on Fox News. They wanted to do what they could to derail the Mueller investigation.
Monica, they're talking about the House Intel Committee wanting those 4 pages, that synopsis released to the public. They just want to feed the beast. They want to feed Fox.
Well, they're trying to discredit Chairman Nunes. They're trying to discredit the House Intelligence Committee that's exposing a lot of this corruption and a lot of this evidence. I can tell you tonight, Laura, based on one of my sources, that we will see all of these documents. We will see them, and there's more than one memo, and we will see these documents. Why are we not seeing it now?
Why do we need to wait to see it? I think the committee has been holding it.
They're going through a process, and we will see them.
I think the process should be bipartisan because the concern is bipartisan. So why has only part of the committee already seen the memo and the rest of the committee hasn't? Furthermore, why has DOJ not vetted the memo with regards to national security, which is the primary issue of all of this in the first place? So it doesn't sound like a very sound.
The attacks on Chairman Nunes and the House Intelligence Committee that's doing incredible work here. Look, when they talk about, those who are attacking their investigation are trying to discredit the FBI and the DOJ and attacking these institutions as dangerous. Yeah. No, you know what? The top hierarchy of the FBI and DOJ, Laura, discredited themselves. And the one name missing from all of this, Laura, is Barack Obama. The idea that all of these people freelanced all of this, or that anything happened in the Obama administration,
I'm not sure why we're talking about Barack Obama tonight, because we're talking about the Mueller investigation of Trump.
All right, we're out of time. But I think, look, the Democrats have a chance to see this memo. They could all go to the secure room to read this memo. Only, I think, a few have. I'm always for more sunshine, more transparency. Let's see what it is. Let's see if, maybe the Republicans are overblowing it. Maybe this is not a big deal. I don't know. I like to see it for myself. Although people seem really hot and bothered by it. So I think we should all see it.
We will see it.
And guys, thank you very much. I'd love to have you both back. We have so much more to tell you about the FBI corruption and the Mueller probe coming up with guest Roger Stone and Congressman Peter King. But next, an exclusive live interview with Ben Shapiro, who just gave the first speech by a conservative on the UConn campus since violence broke out the last time a conservative spoke there. Don't move. Under pressure tonight, the University of Connecticut finally let students sponsor a conservative speaker on campus again. Woo! This was after violent protests erupted outside and inside the hall where the Gateway pundits, Lucienne Wintrich, spoke back in November. Well, the Daily Wire's Ben Shapiro just wrapped up a speech hosted by the college Republicans. Here's a sample.
Something has to be done about a system where a few crazed leftists decide they don't want to hear somebody speak, and therefore people from the outside who pay taxes to universities like this one can't get in. It's a great thing that universities have people like me, and yes, like the person who's speaking opposite me on this campus, to give a variation of ideas.
Oh my gosh, those words are so dangerous. The university actually offered, I kid you not, counseling to students who might be upset even at the mention or the thought of Shapiro's appearance. He looks like an unsuspecting guy to me. Well, let's ask the man himself. Appearing on The Angle exclusively in a new segment we're calling Back to School. It's kind of a Rodney Dangerfield thing. Did you traumatize snowflakes on campus tonight, Ben? You look so just innocent and nice, and they seemed very upset about the prospect of your arriving. You were in the Storrs campus, correct?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it was very intimidating. I mean, beneath this innocuous exterior lies the heart of a monster. And I just went in and started tearing people apart. I jumped into the audience. I know I ripped at least one guy's throat out. But in actuality, none of those things happened, of course. And this is what's so funny. I mean, this is the last campus where they've had to bring out dozens of security members, dozens of cops. The Stadies were on call, apparently, all because of what happened when Lucien came to speak. And that's not rare. I mean, when I was at Berkeley, they had to bring hundreds of police officers. When I was at Northwestern, they banned the public from coming. When I was at the University of Wisconsin, the front of the stage was taken over. And when I was at Cal State LA, a near riot broke out. So it varies based on campus. Tonight, thank God, was actually relatively calm. I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that the university really did its job in getting a lot of security out there. Part of it had to do with the fact it was cold. These are fair weather protesters. They're not going to show up when it's 30 degrees outside. But part of it too, I think, is that the number of people who were allowed in was limited. I mean, if you were from an outside group, you weren't allowed to come, even though there were all these security officers available.
Now, was it packed out, Ben? Was it a full auditorium, or?
Yeah, I mean, they could have given us bigger space. There are about 500 seats. All of them were full.
Yeah.
But they did prevent people who wanted to come in from the outside coming in. I was told by the college Republicans there are another 600 to 700 people who wanted to come in and who were turned away because if you're just a tax-paying member of the public and you wanted to come, they wouldn't allow you without a student ID.
You sound like Donald Trump. I had 700 people outside and they couldn't get in. I'm just teasing you.
He draws slightly bigger crowds than I do.
There were 10,000 people outside. No, Ben, we have a clip. We have a clip of a student who actually wanted to get in tonight. Let's watch.
They basically said that even if there's open seats and also unclaimed wristbands, they're still not going to let us into the actual event.
Did they tell you why?
Nope. They said they're not the people to talk to, that there's nobody that will come in and talk to us, and even if there is somebody inside there that could help us or could kind of sort this out, they're not going to come out and talk to us.
What do you make of that?
They don't want us to go to this event.
Why?
Because Ben Shapiro.
Now, I couldn't tell from that clip or by the look of the guy whether he was like a friend or a foe. I was guessing foe, but then at the end I said friend. I couldn't really tell. It was like this, Ben. But apparently they were like, poor people want to come in. Like, no, you can't go. This is at some point, like two of my brothers went to UConn, so I know the Storrs campus. It was a long time ago, but I know it quite well. And it can't be that scary for them just to hear a conservative speak. It can't possibly be.
You know, I don't think that it is. As I said in the speech, if you actually have to go seek mental health counseling because you hear that I'm coming to campus, you probably need to seek mental health counseling for a number of other issues that you have. But again, it's the security that I think is the new way that censorship is taking place. So as I've said, there are a bunch of campuses now where the administration says, yeah, we're happy to have a conservative speak, but we're not going to allow people to come and actually hear this. That's what happened at Berkeley. They had a 1,500-seat theater. They ruled out the top half of the theater, and then they prevented people who came same day from actually attending. It's not restricted to me. This is happening to a bunch of conservative speakers around the country, all in the name of safety. But Anita Hill spoke at UConn last week, and it was completely open to the public. So all you need to have is a few leftists who are nasty and make threats, and then presumably the entire public is barred from coming in the name of safety, of course.
So it's like Obamacare. You have access to care in theory, but you don't really have care. You're there, but you can't really hear you. I just have to read, Ben, because I was like crying laughing. The diversity officer at UConn, Joelle Murchison, in her letter that just went out before your speech, that we understand even the thought of an individual coming to campus with the views that Mr. Shapiro expresses can be concerning and even hurtful. Please utilize the many campus resources available if you should want to talk through your feelings about this issue, including my office, the Cultural Center's Dean of Students. I actually want to go pay her a visit and say, I've had a tough day today, and I really need some, just a hug. I mean, you just need a hug. Well, Ben, I'm glad you look good, though. You look like you had fun tonight.
It was fun, and I will say this, there's no more useless title on campus than Chief Diversity Officer, whose entire job is to just pretend to care about a bunch of people who are too weak-kneed to actually come in here as a dissenting point of view.
All right, Ben Shapiro, and great to talk to you. And by the way, the Department of Justice is demanding Congressman Devin Nunes not release a memo alleging surveillance abuses by the Obama-era FBI. Gee, I wonder why. House Intel Committee member and Ingraham fave Peter King joins us with a reaction next. Okay, well, really quick addendum from the previous story we just covered. My friend Gordon, who is a freshman at UConn, just said, I wasn't able to get into the Shapiro event either. Everyone wanted to go. More conservatives on campus than people think. Thank you, Gordo. By the way, the Justice Department is asking to see a memo reportedly outlining serious wrongdoing at the FBI and Justice Department under President Obama. House Intel Chairman Devin Nunes is taking steps to declassify the memo summarizing the findings of his Russia investigation. Well, a letter from the Justice Department charges that it would be extraordinarily reckless tonight to release the memo without first giving the DOJ and FBI the opportunity to review it. Let's sort this all out with someone who's read the memo, Congressman Peter King of New York. I thought you were going to be here tonight with me, Congressman, who serves on the Intel Committee. Great to see you. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Laura. How are you?
I'm great. So what is the Justice Department, the FBI? They're suddenly all squirrely about the release of this memo. What goes on?
Yeah, well, this memo, it's a 4-page memo put together by a very talented professional staff on the committee, reviewed by all the Republican members, made available to all the members of the committee, and voted out of the committee last week to be made available to all the members of the House. The findings in here are very, very significant, showing, I believe, either terrible mistakes or deliberate wrongdoing at high levels. And right now, the Justice Department, and what Devin Nunes plans on doing, because over 200 members of the House have looked at it, only about 10 Democrats, by the way, and there is a clamor by the public to see the memo. We're going to make sure there's nothing in there, any small item that may reveal the stand. I've not spoken to Devin, but I've spoken to his staff people tonight, and he fully intends to go ahead. We're not going to show it to the Justice Department.
Congressman, knowing what you know now, you've read the memo, you've seen the evidence so far. Do you have faith, as of now, in the upcoming result of this investigation, knowing what you know now and what you've seen?
Well, I've sat through, I don't know, whether it's hundreds of hours. I mean, I've been in there for probably 20 witnesses who have come before our committee, and certainly all of the major ones have sat there for 7, 8, 9 hours. Again, all the big names you've heard about, I've been there for that. I have not heard one word yet indicating any collusion. Now, I don't know if Bob Mueller has anything else, but he's talking to many of the same people. So if they come out with any finding of collusion at all, based on what I've heard, then I would say that they're not doing the job. But on the other hand, I think right now, I believe the president's lawyers feel this is going in the right direction with all the improprieties that went on here. The fact that this investigation, I believe, should never, ever been started in the first place. I look upon it either intentionally or unintentionally as a political hit job. I mean, we're losing sight of the fact here that you have the leading law enforcement organization in the world investigating a presidential candidate based on the flimsiest of evidence. I wouldn't even call it evidence, on the flimsiest rumors. That's what this was based on, and that's a terrible precedent to set. You can do that to any candidate if you wanted to. And when you bring the FBI into a political campaign, it's wrong.
Well, I want to play for you a clip I watched this afternoon of a former RNC chief, Michael Steele. He was on MSNBC, and he was criticizing Congress and anyone in the media who would cast aspersions on the FBI here. Let's watch.
We have now set up a wholesale operation between the White House and Capitol Hill to sully the reputation of good men and women who work inside the FBI because of, as you noted, Howard, some emails. Yes, they're problematic, but let the appropriate authorities ferret that out. To do what they're doing, the end game they're playing right now, what they don't seem to understand, it could blow up in their face just as much as it could sully the FBI.
Response, Congressman.
We are talking about a handful of people at the top. The FBI is an outstanding organization. There are people at the top, though, who have not served the FBI well. And I would say the rank and file of the FBI appreciates what we're doing because they are concerned. I mean, I've heard from retired FBI people who are shocked about what's coming out. And to me, the emails and the text messages, that's all important. But that's really just an indication of this investigation from the start should never have been started. It's based on a false premise, and that's continued right through. And whether we're talking about the FBI, whether we're talking about John Brennan at the CIA and others, this to me has all been a concerted effort to go after Donald Trump. Listen, you have a lot of reasons you can disagree with Donald Trump, but to say that he was colluding with the enemy when there's no evidence there, to me, is shameful. And it's going on now. I think it's significant that now it's being leaked to the New York Times that they're talking about obstruction of justice, about events that happened 6 months after the campaign was over. The campaign where the Russians apparently colluded.
Yeah, we noticed the leaking right as things started turning really good for Trump on the economy and the shutdown. Then all the leaks came from the Mueller team. Congressman King, thank you so much. Great segment. And by the way, President Trump makes a crucial decision on how to deal with the Russia investigation. But Roger Stone says it's exactly the wrong move. He'll tell us why right back after this.
Robert Mueller is taking advantage of the president's loquaciousness, the fact that he's never a man who suffers from a paucity of words. And what is absolutely clear is that Mr. Mueller has no evidence of Russian collusion. So now we're all the way cycled back around to the dismissal of Mr. Comey. And he seeks to entrap the president in some kind of process crime, perjury or obstruction. Therefore, the best advice that I could give the president, and I agree with Judge Andrew Napolitano on this, is that under no circumstances should he grant Mr. Mueller an interview. It's a suicide mission. It's a very clear perjury trap.
Under Lawrence Walsh's investigation during Iran-Contra, Roger, the special counsel there, Walsh, agreed not to interview President Reagan in person. They submitted interrogatories. The president responded to the written interrogatories, and that's how it went down. Obviously, here, with the precedent of the Star special counsel, they had the videotaped testimony and so forth. So it's kind of a different precedent. But what if they agree to a narrow pathway, a narrow parameter, where you were only going to ask about these two things? That's what, in a normal grand jury setting or a normal interview setting for a normal client, no lawyer would allow you to go in. They would say, okay, we're only going to, we'll talk, but only about these two topics. What about narrowing the confines of the questions?
Well, traditionally, if the information can be got otherwise, the president would not be interviewed. A perfectly reasonable compromise to avoid a constitutional crisis would be for Mr. Mueller to submit written questions and for the president to respond to them in writing. A reasonable person could disagree with that. But for the president to walk into the blade, as it were, and to try to pretend that Mueller and his band of partisan pirates are just honest brokers, honest prosecutors, just trying to ferret out the truth, is disproved by everything we know so far. And now, with an extraordinary number of text messages from the FBI going missing, I'm old enough to remember when 18.5 minutes of Nixon's White House tapes went missing and the mainstream media and the liberals went insane. Where is that outrage today? If nothing, that proves the partisan nature of this inquiry and the fact that the Department of Justice under Rod Rosenstein, who I have advocated the president fire immediately for his conflict of interest, is not on the level.
John, you said earlier today the following about what the president should do and how we should consider it. Let's watch.
I actually think President Trump should welcome the opportunity to speak to Mueller and try to accelerate it, because after he's done, that will wrap up Mueller's probe.
Roger, I assume you disagree with that.
Well, spoken like the neocon Bushite that he is. Look, I think that's naive. And I think that's how the president's lawyers are selling this to the president. But these are the same lawyers who urged him to waive executive privilege and turn over all records depending on the impartiality and the lack of bias of Robert Mueller. It is a foolhardy piece of advice. It is a suicide mission. Under no circumstances should the president grant Mueller a live interview. Clearly, there is a compromise. Let them submit questions in writing. Let the president respond in writing.
I think he could have done better than Ty Cobb and John Dowd. I mean, God bless them as lawyers. I mean, he needed his own dream team, and I think he needed to raise the bar for the council representation as well. Roger, thank you so much. Terrific appearance as always. Now, President Trump gives surprising remarks on Dreamers today. Ooh. Lindsey Graham is a little DACA recipients over a period of maybe 10 to 12 years. If, it's a big if, he gets legislation with strong border protections, including funding for the wall, as well to an end to chain migration and an end of the visa lottery system. You hear that, Lindsey? Well, the White House clarified that the citizenship offer would only apply to the 800,000 illegal immigrants enrolled in DACA and that they would have to meet certain conditions. Well, Amnesty supporters welcomed the president's statement. Senator Lindsey Graham was practically doing the Snoopy dance. There he is. He said today, with this strong statement by President Trump, I have never felt better about our chances of finding a solution on immigration. Do not try to co-opt his solution. Meanwhile, earlier this week, we told you about HHS, how it's still using taxpayer dollars to shuttle illegal immigrants around the country after they've crossed the border. That's fun. A lawsuit now could determine whether the federal government has the right to force states to accept refugees for resettlement, and whether the feds are responsible for the states for this financial burden, the states that are accepting them. Got a lot of news on this front. And Don Barnett just published a report on that subject of the refugees for the Center for Immigration Studies. He joins us now from Denver. Don, there's so much immigration news, but let's focus for a moment on the refugee issue. I have friends up in Vermont, in the Burlington area, and they say that people arrive in Burlington who are refugees and no one in the community is even told about it. They just kind of show up, and they show up in the public schools, and then the residents are the last to know. What's going on?
That's exactly right. There's virtually no consultation with state authorities about where refugees will be resettled, or little. There's some, but it's wholly inadequate. And no provision for the costs that the refugees bring to the local communities.
Don, I have a question. How do they choose which localities get the refugees? It seems like we have an overload of refugees in two places, Maine and Minneapolis-St. Paul. And it's kind of the same latitude. And the maniacs and the Minnesota people, they're wild. I don't understand those people. I mean, I love them, but they're kind of a little crazy. That's why I like them. But I mean, it's right. A lot there, and there are a lot of Somalis in both places. Omaha has a lot. Northern Virginia has quite a few refugees. I mean, do they throw a dart at the map? I mean, how do they figure this out?
Well, basically, it's run by private nonprofits, and they set up shop, in effect, where welfare is the most generous, where jobs are available and housing is cheap. Now, in the case of Maine, most of the refugees that are in Maine arrive there after they arrived somewhere else. Maybe they first arrived in Atlanta, and then they moved to Maine because it was better. Maine, interestingly enough, is a state that has tried to get out of refugee resettlement. And has officially withdrawn.
Doesn't want any part of this. Yeah, they don't want any part of it. We got problems with welfare, gangs, housing, huge cost to the state.
Right.
And I'm sorry to interrupt here, but when you think about the refugees from, let's say, Northern Africa, and they're relocated to Minnesota or Maine or wherever the Catholic Charities or whatever Catholic or Lutheran group they're getting money from the feds, and they're so like assimilation has got to be a little bit trying in certain states and certain climates, correct?
Yes, it's a very big issue, and the engagement with the refugee is very short, 3 to 8 months, and it's simply inadequate. There is no assimilation. Assimilation is, as a matter of fact, not in the lexicon anymore. There's not even an attempt. They don't even pay lip service to assimilation.
Yeah, the idea of the melting pot, come and be American, they just smash the pot and the water goes everywhere. I mean, it's wild. Don, thanks for that information.
Right, it definitely doesn't play.
Yeah, we're gonna stay on this topic because a lot of you want to hear from it, and we'll be on it. Do not go away. We have a lot more to get to on the Laura Ingraham Show, the Ingraham Angle, radio, TV, it's all the same. Stay with us. DACA recipients over a period of maybe 10 to 12 years, if, it's a big if, he gets legislation with strong border protections, including funding for the wall, as well to an end to chain migration and an end of the visa lottery system. You hear that, Lindsay? Well, the White House clarified that the citizenship offer would only apply to the 800,000 illegal immigrants enrolled in DACA and that they would have to meet certain conditions. Well, Amnesty supporters welcomed the president's statement. Senator Lindsey Graham was practically doing the Snoopy dance. There he is. He said today, with this strong statement by President Trump, I have never felt better about our chances of finding a solution on immigration. Do not try to co-opt his solution. Meanwhile, earlier this week, we told you about HHS, how it's still using taxpayer dollars to shuttle illegal immigrants around the country after they've crossed the border. That's fun. A lawsuit now could determine whether the federal government has the right to force states to accept refugees for resettlement, and whether the feds are responsible for the states for this financial burden, the states that are accepting them. Got a lot of news on this front. And Don Barnett just published a report on that subject of the refugees for the Center for Immigration Studies. He joins us now from Denver. Don, there's so much immigration news, but let's focus for a moment on the refugee issue. I have friends up in Vermont, in the Burlington area, and they say that people arrive in Burlington who are refugees and no one in the community is even told about it. They just kind of show up, and they show up in the public schools, and then the residents are the last to know. What's going on?
That's exactly right. There's virtually no consultation with state authorities about where refugees will be resettled, or little. There's some, but it's wholly inadequate. And no provision for the costs that the refugees bring to the local communities.
Don, I have a question. How do they choose which localities get the refugees? It seems like we have an overload of refugees in two places, Maine and Minneapolis-St. Paul. And it's kind of the same latitude. And the maniacs and the Minnesota people, they're wild. I don't understand those people. I mean, I love them, but they're kind of a little crazy. That's why I like them. But I mean, it's right. A lot there and a lot there. A lot of Somalis in both places. Omaha has a lot. Northern Virginia has quite a few refugees. I mean, do they throw a dart at the map? I mean, how do they figure this out?
Well, basically, it's run by private nonprofits, and they set up shop, in effect, where welfare is the most generous, where jobs are available and housing is cheap. Now, in the case of Maine, most of the refugees that are in Maine arrive there after they arrived somewhere else. Maybe they first arrived in Atlanta, and then they moved to Maine because it was better. Maine, interestingly enough, is a state that has tried to get out of refugee resettlement. And has officially withdrawn.
Want any part of this. Yeah, they don't want any part of it. We got problems
exactly.
with welfare, gangs, housing, huge cost to the state.
Right.
And I'm sorry to interrupt here, but when you think about the refugees from, let's say, Northern Africa, and they're relocated to Minnesota or Maine or wherever the Catholic Charities or whatever Catholic or Lutheran group they're getting money from the feds, and they're so like assimilation has got to be a little bit trying in certain states and certain climates, correct?
Yes, it's a very big issue, and the engagement with the refugee is very short, 3 to 8 months, and it's simply inadequate. There is no assimilation. Assimilation is, as a matter of fact, not in the lexicon anymore. There's not even an attempt. They don't even pay lip service to assimilation.
Yeah, the idea of the melting pot, come and be American, they just smash the pot and the water goes everywhere. I mean, it's wild. Don, thanks for that information.
Right, it definitely doesn't play.
Yeah, we're gonna stay on this topic because a lot of you want to hear from it, and we'll be on it. Do not go away. We have a lot more to get to on the Laura Ingraham Show, the Ingraham Angle, radio, TV. It's all the same. Stay with us.